بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back, my dear students, to today's English lesson. What are we going to do in this lesson? Let's take a look. So we are still in unit 4. We're talking about pastime activities. So today's lesson is going to be conversation and about me. But before we go to the lesson, do you remember the last homework, the previous homework? What were you asked to do and what did you do about it? So this is the previous homework. You were asked to write sentences with know how to. You were asked to write about yourself and use these words. Use cook and use play volleyball. I asked you to categorize it here. Put it in this table. So either things I know how to do or things I don't know how to do. Here I chose the word cook. Where did I put it here? I know how to cook. It's a thing I can do. I know how to cook. What about play volleyball? I don't know how to play volleyball. I can't play volleyball. But I wrote also another example. I know how to make paper planes. And here, I don't know how to speak Spanish. So we used these two verbs here and we did categorize it. I asked you to use these words or come up with words of your own. You can write sentences in this table. Now, let's take a look at the units map. Where are we now? We are done with all of these. So today is the conversation and about you. What are the objectives of today's lesson? By the end of the lesson, you will be able to listen for specific information about pastime activities and talk about favorite pastime activities. Now, let's take a look at this picture. What do you see here? What is the boy doing in the picture? What is he holding? He's holding a plane. But what kind of plane? So, in the conversation, we will listen to two boys speaking about a plane, and they will be talking about this kind of plane. So, take a look at these pictures. Here we have two pictures. The first one, it's a picture of two boys talking. Looks like they're discussing something. And in the second picture, you can see this boy playing with the plane. He's trying to fly the plane. So we will listen to the conversation between the boys and see what are they talking about. One of them, his name is Eric, and the other one, his name is Jason. Listen and try to find out what is the activity they're talking about and what is their favorite pastime activity.
What do you usually do in your free time?
I have an unusual hobby. I fly planes.
That sounds exciting. How often do you do it?
I normally do it on the weekend. I really like to do aerobatics.
You mean you perform stunts and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Wow, but isn't that dangerous?
No, not at all. It's really very safe. You should come along to the flying club sometime.
Sure, I'd love to go up in the air with you.
Up in the air? I fly model airplanes.
Oh, I see. That is an unusual hobby.
So in the conversation, we listened to the boys talking about unusual hobby. What was the unusual hobby? Let's take a look at the conversation here. I want you to read the conversation and listen. Underline the words that you don't know its meaning, so we can find it in the context or look for the meaning later. So this is the conversation between Rick and Jason. Now let's listen.
What do you usually do in your free time?
I have an unusual hobby. I fly planes.
That sounds exciting. How often do you do it?
I normally do it on the weekend. I really like to do aerobatics.
You mean you perform stunts and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Wow, but isn't that dangerous?
No, not at all. It's really very safe. You should come along to the flying club sometime.
Sure, I'd love to go up in the air with you.
Up in the air? I fly model airplanes.
Oh, I see. That is an unusual hobby.
So what was the pastime activity they were talking about? Flying airplanes. So what kind of airplanes? So here Rick, he said, I have unusual hobby. It's not a normal hobby. What was his unusual hobby? I fly planes. That's his hobby. That's what he does for as a pastime activity. So, but he said, oh, okay, it sounds weird and we don't know anything about it. That's why Rick was explaining how often does he do it and what does he do it, how is he doing it. So Jason asked him, how often do you do it? How often? Do you remember in the last lesson when we talked about using how often in the questions? How often do you do it? What was his answer? I normally do it on weekends. On weekends. Is he doing it daily? No, only on weekends. So now I want you to take a look at this part here. You mean you perform stunts and stuff like that? What is the word here? You mean. You mean what? And what comes after the you mean? You mean you perform stunts and stuff like that? And also here, stuff like that. Why is it blue? What's with the word you mean and stuff like that? So here also Rick said, you should come along to the flying club sometime. Sometime. What do we call sometimes on the weekend? And these words called it adverbs, right? From the last lesson we talked about adverbs of frequency. We took a look at the word sometime. So here we have, you should come along to the flying club sometime. Now here also we have another blue word. Oh, I see, that is an unusual hobby. What was the unusual hobby? Rick's hobby, I fly planes. Now, let's take a look. Now that we listen to this conversation, let's answer these questions. The first question, what's Rick's pastime? So what was his favorite activity? Something that he does in his free time. He flies model airplanes. He flies model airplanes. Now, the second question, how often does he do it? How often does he do it? We're asking about the time, right? He normally does it on the weekend. He normally does it on the weekend, so the time is the weekend. Now, the next question, does he perform stunts? It's a yes/no question. Does he perform stunts? Yes, he does. What about this question? What does he invite Jason to do? What does he invite Jason to do? Let's take a look here in the conversation. Look. That was the thing he invited Jason to do. Rick said, you should come along to the flying club sometimes. So the answer for this question is what? He invites Jason to come along with him. Where? To the flying club. The next question, what does Jason think Rick's hobby is at first? So what did he think about his hobby? He thinks Rick flies planes. So that was Rick's hobby, right? He thought it's an unusual hobby. Now, in the conversation, we saw some blue words, right? What is the meaning of these words? Here, we use these words when we're speaking. Like this. Here we have the word you mean and then statement. When are we going to use this? In the conversation, he said, you mean you're flying the planes? So, you mean plus statement. It's a way to confirm you understand correctly. He said, I have an unusual hobby. I fly planes. So he said, do you mean you're flying the planes? You mean you fly the planes? So he's confirming, did I understand it correctly? And then his friend said yes. So let's take a look at this example. Qasim said from yesterday's lesson, I like to go indoor climbing. I can say, you mean you climb walls? I'm trying to confirm. Did I understand it well? You mean you climb walls? He could say yes, or mountains, or anything. Now, how about stuff like that? Do you mean you fly planes, stunts, and stuff like that? When are we going to use stuff like that? So we use it, stuff like that, it means that kind of thing. That kind of thing. Let's take a look at these examples here. The first one, I play football and basketball and stuff like that. What is stuff like that? Football, basketball, and what? And other sports. Because football and basketballs are kinds of sports. Now take a look at the next example. I make the bed and cook dinner and stuff like that. Stuff like what? Household chores, right? Making the bed, cooking dinner, these are household chores, right? So when we're saying I make bed, cooking dinner and stuff like that, the rest of and other things, other household chores. How about this example? I read email and play online games and stuff like that. Stuff like what? Online activities. Because reading emails and playing online games, these are called online activities. Now that we are done with you mean and we're done with stuff like that, let's take a look at the next one. You should come along sometime. Here, you should come along, then a space, sometime. It's a way to make an invitation. He said, you can come along to the flying club with me sometime. Now let's take a look at Fatima. Fatima said, I like cooking classes. You should come along with me to the cooking classes sometimes. Fatima is inviting, right? She's asking someone to come along and come along with Fatima to the cooking classes. Now, the last one is I see, I understand. So the meaning of the use of I see means I understand. He said, I have an unusual hobby. He said, I see. Oh, I understand the unusual hobby. But let's take a look at this example here. Fatima said, I learn how to cook and preserve food in the cooking classes. I said, oh, I see. I thought it's only for cooking. I didn't know that preserving food are also in the cooking classes. So I see, oh, I understand. Now, it's your turn. I want you to talk about your favorite pastime activity. So, let's answer these two questions. How often do you do it and where do you do it? So, how often do you do it? That was yesterday's lesson. Do you remember when we talked about how often do you do it? The answer could be once a week, daily, or 3 times a week. These are possible answers. Here, I asked 8 people. I asked Lulu, Fatima, Qasim, Hassan, Noor, Ahmed, Sarah, and Noura. Now we are going to talk about what? I'm asking them, how often do you do your favorite pastime and how do you do it? Lulu said, I read every day. She could read in the library, she could read in her house, in the living room. So she said, I read every day. Now, what about Fatima? What's her favorite pastime activity? I cook every day. In the classes, in the cooking classes, and in the house. What about Qasim? He said, I climb 2 times a week. I climb walls, I climb mountains. I do it 2 times a week, not every day. What about Hassan? He said, I read 3 times a week. Maybe Hassan is a bit older and he must study. That's why he doesn't have enough time to read every day, so he reads 3 times a week. How about Noor? Noor said, I like painting. I paint once a week. Ahmed said, I like playing video games on weekends. So playing video games, it could be with his friends or in the house, right? Now, what about Sarah? Sarah said, I paint 2 times a week. So actually here her friend said, I paint once a week. But Sarah said, I paint 2 times a week. She could paint in a painting studio or she can paint in her house. The last one is Noura. Noura said, I read daily. What is daily? It's an adverb. That means every day. I read daily. Now, what are we going to do? So here, look. What is the most common activity here? So we have 8 people. They have read, cook, climb, read, paint, play, paint, and read. So some of these activities are repeated here. Like what? Like read, like paint. But climb, we saw it only one time. How about playing video games? Only one time here. Now, let's take a look. We want to talk about skills that you can do. So if we're talking about the skills, that means things you can do, right? So from yesterday's lesson, what did we learn? I know how to, or I can. It's just, the meaning is I can, right? So if you're talking about your skills, you can say, I know how to. Then what is your skill? I know how to. Let's take a look at these examples. I know how to speak English. I know how to speak English. What was the skill? Speaking English. This is the skill. Or, I know how to use computer. I know how to use computer. What is the skill? Using computer. Now, I want you to think about an example here. I know how to what? Think about it. You can say it or write it in your notebook. I know how to. Here we have speak. Here I use computer. You can say, I know how to read French. I know how to cook. I know how to paint. All of these are skills. Now, let's take a look. What did we do in today's lesson? So, we did these things. So we listened for specific information about pastime activities. Now, what was the activity that Jason and Rick talked about? It was flying planes. What kind of planes? It was special planes, right? So, and we saw some words that Rick and Jason used. Real talk. Like what? You should come along with me to the flying club sometimes. So he invites his friend to the flying club. And we also saw, oh, I see. What is the meaning of I see? Oh, I understand. And also, what else? So, you mean. So he said, I fly planes. You mean you fly a special kind of planes and stunts and stuff like that? So in this line, there are 2 words here. You mean to confirm the thing you understood and stuff like that. What is the meaning of stuff like that? And stuff like that, it means and other things that have the same nature. In the previous example, I play football, basketball, and stuff like that. Stuff like that means other sports. And what else did we do? We talked about favorite pastime activity. Now, let's take a look at this chart here. From these people, what was their favorite pastime activity? It was reading. 3 of those people speak about reading. So here, Luda said, I read. Hassan said, I read. And also, Noura said, I read. That was the majority of this group likes reading. So we listened to specific information about the unusual hobby of Rick, and we talked about favorite pastime activities. Now, for your homework, what are you going to do? You're going to do this. Write about 3 skills you have. So in the skills, what are you going to use? When you're talking about your skills, I know how to. I want you to write 3 sentences of things you can do, things you know how to do. 1, 2, 3. And I will see, and I will check with you in the next lesson. We will see an example. And thank you very much, my dear students. I will see you in the next lesson.